Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Will the rise of a third political power and party be good for us and the American brand of democracy? Does it play into the expanding renewable energy and sustainability movement? Good questions. Welcome again to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and we take a swipe at the sustainability and the formation of the new American Party. And later on, she follows on the heels of a beloved leader at App State. New ASU Chancellor Sheri Everts will join the dialogue. Please stay with us.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded November 14th, 2014. On this week's program, Ivan Urlaub of the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, Jim Rex from the American Party of South Carolina, and special guest Dr. Sheri Everts, Chancellor of Appalachian State University. And now, here's Chris William.
Welcome to our program, gentlemen. Both, welcome back. Jim, it's been a while. I think you were superintendent of education in South Carolina last time.
I was. I think it might have been 5 or 6 years ago,
Yeah.
and neither one of us has changed.
Yeah, you are good at that. Thank you, Dr. Rex. Good to have you here. Ivan, good to see you.
Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about. And Jim, particularly, thanks for coming on so quickly after the midterm elections. You are the chair of the new American Party, and I say American Party with a capital A because it is an official political party. As we talked about before the program, Jim, the single largest growing party is the independents, what many people call independents, or the officially unaffiliated voters. If they have been growing so much for these last few years, why isn't there kind of more oomph behind a third political party?
Well, I think we have all become creatures of habit. We're all used to envisioning politics in America as being Republican or Democrat, even if we call ourselves independents. When we go to the ballot box, we see those two choices. Often we're unhappy with both choices, but we choose the one that was, least undesirable. And I think that people don't see an alternative that is attractive enough to leave that habit. What we're trying to do with the American Party is give people a very different approach to politics than what we have now. This is a centrist party. It's in the middle. I used to be a high school football coach many years ago, and I try to explain it. It's between the two 30-yard lines. It's not in either end zone. And it's where most of us say we are as Americans. We're conservative in some issues. We're less conservative in others. But we're in that broad center where you can actually find common ground and start to solve problems. The other thing that's very different about this party and this approach is that it requires term limits. It doesn't require a promise or a pledge. It requires and enforces term limits of all of its candidates. A lot of people are fed up with career politicians.
All the way up to the top of the House, the highest office in the land?
Yeah, the highest on the ticket, and this is federal and state. In our last election in South Carolina, 100% of our incumbents were reelected. More than half of them were unchallenged. That's true across the country. And so once people get in office, it's very difficult to get them out of those offices.
And you're not talking about the American Party incumbents. You're talking about the Republican incumbents
Correct.
that have the job were not kept the job.
Correct,
Okay.
100%. And that's typically the case. Overwhelmingly, we return incumbents, even though we say we're dissatisfied with the system, we return those incumbents. So term limits is a big part of it, transparency. This party also requires that they meet legal and ethical standards while serving in office. If they don't, the party does not allow them to run again. You know, now, no matter what we catch them doing in both parties, they look the other way and let them stay in office. So the sorts of things that most of us have been saying we want, the kinds of changes we want to see, that neither dominant party has been willing or able to give us, is what this party is trying to provide.
So, Ivan, this is not all going to be about the formation of a third political party in the land here, but since we're on that thing, how would sustainability and renewable energy benefit from a third political party? Would that be good?
Well, I think it would for this reason. When we poll likely voters in North Carolina, because we don't work in South Carolina, we see, we ask them, what is your support or not support for different resources? And across the board, 90%, high 70s, 80s for solar, wind, bioenergy, energy efficiency, natural gas, and then coal and nuclear, which have their challenges, the support drops into the 40s and 50s. And that's been consistent for 4 years now. So what we see is kind of regardless of fiscal ideology, current party affiliation, there is broad-based support by gender, by geography, by age. There's broad-based support for these newer resources that are cleaner, more local, help our resiliency, our security, can strengthen our communities more when we find ways to use them affordably.
Yeah, and to be careful so we don't put you both on the Mutual Admiration Society here, but since you're sitting right next to him, Jim, you know, how would a third party, and in this case the American Party, how would the American Party feel about sustainable and renewable energy? I mean, it seems natural and it seems obvious, but politically that's not always the answer, right? Right.
Well, oftentimes, regardless of what the polls show the majority of Americans want, neither political party responds appropriately to that. That goes back to these gerrymandered safe districts, with primaries being the real contest, not the general election. And so people play to their base, even if the base doesn't represent what the majority of Americans want or say they want their political process to do for them. So this party focuses primarily on the economy, and especially on having a globally competitive 21st century economy. And the premise is, Chris, that if we don't have that, nothing else really much matters. You don't have a middle class, you don't have a strong military, you don't have world-class healthcare and education and training. You know, nothing works if the economy doesn't work. And so this party avoids all these hot-button social issues that are really just distractions that are used by politicians and ideologues to sort of, divide us as a nation.
Would sustainable be, is that a hot button
issue? Oh yeah, infrastructure, sustainable energy, training and education, because our people are competing against the people in these other nations, globally. I said infrastructure, comprehensive tax reform has to take place. We've got to do something about the deficit and the debt. I mean, those are the things that are going to make us competitive globally.
Right, well, I agree with you, but I guess what I'm asking here, Jim, is would the body language of the American Party favor sustainability and renewable energy?
Very much.
Yeah.
That is a long-term issue that we have to resolve as a nation. Many would argue, we have to resolve as a planet. Why shouldn't the United States be the leader in that? Why shouldn't we be exporting that?
At what point, and we've got a couple minutes left, this is not fair, I didn't know we were going to start taking this deep dive, and no one's fault here, but there's just so much about this. So Ivan, in 2015, the provisions, the tax credits, the subsidies, if you will, and I know that's not it's a bit of a negative connotation, but the subsidies for renewable energy in North Carolina will sunset, and again, no pun intended. If that happens, does the air come out of the sales of renewable energy? Does it become then, well, now what? It's not going to work.
Well, I think so we take one step back. Renewable energy and energy efficiency has been excellent for the North Carolina economy and ratepayers. We have plenty of evidence that shows that by having the policies in place that we've had, including the Renewable Energy Investment Tax Credit, it's had a dampening effect on electricity rates. So rates are lower than where they would have been. That's good news for everybody. But also it's improved our global economic footprint and our competitiveness. Our exports in the clean energy industry have been expanding each year, as well as employment. The incentive has been a good policy that's working for the economy as well. There's $1.93 back to state and local government coffers for every dollar of tax credit claimed. And as long as that remains positive, facially, whatever we think about tax incentives, at least we're coming out ahead with the policy. If that weren't the case, then I think we'd be hard pressed from a fiscally responsible perspective. There would have to be a great case for economic competitiveness. There is a great case, but we have this net positive fiscally as well. What happens to the industry going forward is I think we just really, don't fully throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we certainly weaken ourselves. The world, the International Energy Agency projects that by 2050, 50% of electricity generated on this planet is going to be just solar power. Mm-hmm. And whether that turns out to be precise or not, that's absolutely the direction all of the renewable energy resources and efficiency is headed. The costs are coming down. Customers can do it directly. We can source it locally, and our industry can work here. The full industry clusters. We have all the other assets we need, from great educational institutions, infrastructure, economic development institutions that get it, financial community. We can increasingly rival Silicon Valley.
I wish we had more time because it's important. We might have to have you both back just to talk about that issue. We're going to bring our guest on. And I noticed you have a newborn. You just use the term baby, throw the baby out with the bathwater. Is it lack of sleep maybe at your house? Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much.
We're going to meet our guest in just a moment. Next week on this program, another hot button, Jim, to use your term, is immigration. In North and South Carolina, indeed a big debate, and will continue and be bigger. Next week on this program, we will talk about immigration with Astrid Chirinos and Carl Blackstone. And then in a couple weeks, commercial real estate has come back surprisingly hot. Almost any metro in the Carolinas you go to, and you will see it looks like a garden of cranes. And there's a lot of construction going on. And then a few weeks from now, we have our annual economic forecast. It's always a bit of an economic free-for-all and certainly a lot of fun. I hope you'll tune in for that. There is, and for a long time, been something indivisible between ASU and the crunchiness of life in the North Carolina mountains. This well-known alternative nature of Boone, Blowing Rock, and Asheville is certainly attractive and charming to many, but a bigger question is, how does that affect where Appalachian State would like to go academically? And to pile on top of that, how does the installation of a new chancellor influence the arc of the future of the university? Joining the discussion now is Appalachian State University new chancellor, Dr. Sheri Everts. Dr. Everts, welcome south. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Chancellor, you are following on the heels of a beloved man, Ken Peacock, not just at the university and the B school up there, but just in general, people liked him. So how do you follow that act?
Well, it's not easy. I'll start with that. Those are very big shoes to fill, and certainly something I knew full well when this opportunity came about. But I'd say that actually I feel very fortunate to be able to follow a successful, popular, kind of a rock star chancellor. In one regard, I find a university that is not broken. It is marvelously well connected to the community and the solutions that I think Appalachian has been working towards for a long time. Ken Peacock's an enormously important part of that, but to be able to build on that legacy, to be able to build on that success, I think is a wonderful opportunity for anyone, and I feel very fortunate to be able to try to fill those shoes.
I'm going to let an educator jump in here and ask you a question.
Well, first of all, it sounds like a great fit, so congratulations to you. I have been in higher education for a number of decades and actually sat in the president's role for a while. A lot of concern about access to higher education and rising costs of higher education. Parents, even with newborns, are starting to wonder how they're going to pay for it. What is the answer to that, Sheri? I mean, how do we hold the rising costs down to provide the accessibility we know we need to have a competitive economy and to have our young people have access to higher education?
Well, I think that's a really important question. Of course, that's one of the key factors that we consider anytime we even contemplate any sort of tuition increase. But access is absolutely key, but also is growing that excellence that Chancellor Peacock built at Appalachian and ensuring that we can continue to deliver that fabulous education that people have come to expect of Appalachian. You know, really one of the things that I'm particularly proud of is how many times Appalachian is named in a variety of different resources in regard to best bang for the buck in regard to that education that's provided. So whether it's Washington Monthly that lists us in number 7 in the nation in best bang for the buck, or it's Forbes that talks about the affordability factor and how much you get for your dollar at Appalachian. I think those measures have been really very important, not only in us maintaining our graduation rates, our retention rates, that work towards those important pieces that I know you're looking forward to with that young child that kept you awake at 4 a.m. One of the things that I love about that story, however, is you got up and read to that child, and that's one of the keys to the success,
Sure.
I'm sure, bodes well for that. But it certainly is one of the things that we monitor and maintain and make sure that we're focusing upon.
Thank you.
Across the landscape, I've been in this job, it'll be 10 years come February, and more than any other institution in the United States, we see well-trained workers coming from Appalachian State University. In the beginning, it was coming down off the mountain,
Yes.
and for that job opportunity. Now those job opportunities are up on the mountain, they're in the coast, and they're everywhere. What do you think about when you think about continuing to ASU's legacy of being this pioneer and training that workforce for this very dynamic and evolving energy future that we're all grappling with?
Well, I think that's one of the things that's most exciting about this opportunity. One, again, the legacy that Chancellor Peacock has left for this lucky individual that gets to follow him. But the Appalachian Energy Summit is one of the things that I was most excited about. Of course, you're fully aware of the third Energy Summit and what that brought from around the world, really, to Appalachian. And I think one of the things that's most exciting about that is the conversations that are occurring, the connections that are occurring, the expectations for future growth in jobs, in really the solutions for many of the nation and the world's problems. And I think what you were talking about earlier fits perfectly into that focus in regard to where we're headed as an institution. But I'll tell you a story. When I was named Chancellor at Appalachian State, I had colleagues from across the nation call me and say, "Do you know where you're going?" And I said, "Well, I think I know where I'm going." And they said, "Well, that's the leader." Appalachian certainly holds this energy summit, which is key, but also in regard to some of the policies, procedures, et cetera, in place for the North Carolina system and the Carolinas. I knew full well I was headed to better weather. That's certainly true as well.
When you talk about, when we all talk about Appalachian, everybody talks about it glowingly, and I mean, you even said some elegant things about Chancellor Peacock. So you've got a school that has a certain brand. It's in the North Carolina mountains. We mentioned on the open, it's connected with the crunchiness of Asheville and Boone and Blowing Rock. So how do you, and Sheri, seriously, how do you take this school, as you said, and build on it, but more importantly, take the academic gravitas and increase that more than just the charming nature of where it is and what it's been? I mean, specifically, what are you going to try to do?
Well, I think there are a couple of things that have already been outlined, whether in the strategic plan, which specifically talks about that enormous growth potential in sustainability, which I think you see happening already, but also in terms of that's spelled out in our assessment plan, really associated with our accreditation plan towards globally competitive programs. And I think building on those, ensuring that we have additional opportunities for students, not only in terms of local and regional and statewide internships, but those really international internships as well, so they remain globally competitive, globally connected, and really can illustrate that prior to their graduation. And building on those pieces is key. Another important initiative that's really was started previously, Appalachian's newest college is the Health Sciences College. And of course, there'll be tremendous growth, and there has been. Just in the last 8 years, enrollment has doubled in that Health Sciences College, not surprisingly perhaps to any of you. We just started a joint program with Wake Forest in a physician's assistant program. Those opportunities, I think, are, again, those ideas that are part of the fabric of Appalachian now that will really be possibilities for us to grow and build into the future.
Jim?
On November 4th, we had in South Carolina the lowest voter turnout in 40 years. Nationwide, the lowest voter turnout in 76 years. And when you look at Generation Y, your college students, undergraduates, they have an even lower involvement in the political process. I know that institutions of higher education realize they have an increasing obligation to create a global student. But they also, I think, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, have an obligation to create a student who is going to be an active, involved citizen in the political process. And we're not doing that very well as a nation. I'd like to hear your thoughts about what APP can do, or perhaps any institution can do, to help with the global citizenry as well as the more active citizen right here at home.
And I'll say that that's actually one of the things that attracted me to Appalachian State, and it's that civic responsibility and civic engagement that lives in the strategic plan and lives on the mountain. Those students at Appalachian care deeply about their future and the future of their neighbors. And so their involvement there, I think, is key, not only in terms of voting, but being educated in regard to voting and ensuring that they're helping to really send the message that this is part of their duty as a citizen of Boone, of the region, of the state, and really of the United States. And so I'm very excited about some of the processes, some of the ideas they have for how they're going to change the world, but how they're going to be informed voters and ensure that they continue in that process.
That's great. Knowing that ASU's strengths in sustainability and energy, what can so we have a fast-growing business community, a number of clusters across our state, and expanding throughout the Carolinas. A lot of academic partnerships, a lot of public-private partnership research and development opportunities seem to be continuing to surface. How do you want the business community to show up to help you achieve your academic mission?
Thank you for asking that question. I think, one, it's really well established, and again, I'll give kudos to Chancellor Peacock in regard to building so many of those relationships. But to continue to offer internships, to continue to hire our students, to continue to make those opportunities available so that our students learn with and from the business community. I think growing and increasing those opportunities is in all of our best interests. I'd also say that it's something that I found interesting and surprising in coming to Appalachian is 66% of our students choose Appalachian because of that reputation in regard to sustainability.
How many
across the disciplines? 66%.
Wow.
50% of our faculty have some sort of engagement in regard to sustainability through their coursework, again, across the disciplines. That's a really impressive opportunity for business to connect, regardless of what it is that is the discipline of that particular professor. So I think there are a great many more, whether internships, fellowships, opportunities for students to learn in and with business would be very helpful and appreciated as we continue to grow those opportunities.
Chancellor, Tom Ross, your boss, sat right there in that chair and said not long ago, he said, we're not sure that every child should attend a four-year university. So with that, and he said it more than once, so with that idea, what is your role to help more in an apprenticeship role and you know, maybe more of a connectivity with the community college or the technical system in South Carolina, something like that. So what is Appalachian State, what is your responsibility to do something about making sure, well, maybe not a four-year degree here, but here's something you might consider and this is how we can help you do it?
Absolutely, and I think some of the connections and relationships that already exist at Appalachian with the K-12 districts, not only locally, but in the region, are really key in that regard. And whether it's a matter of providing them with the connections to camps, to professors, to our students, really to help in so many of those endeavors. I know that our students do a tremendous amount of volunteer work with the K-12 schools, as do our student athletes, to really ensure that whether they're reading to students in the K-12 schools, that they're providing an opportunity to serve as a mentor. Some of those pieces may lead to attendance at a four-year institution, and some may not, but it still provides that rich connection to a university that I think is very much valued in the region. And those students also, as citizens of not only the region but of the world, want to ensure those connections are strong, whether it's someone who's going to attend a four-year university with them or be their neighbor.
Yeah, thank you. We'll have to have you back. We're out of time. And I hope you like football. Good luck.
I love football. I'm from Nebraska. Of course I do.
Of course. Enough said. Thank you, Sheri. Good to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Please come back.
I enjoyed it.
Okay.
I will.
Good to see you, Ivan. Good luck getting some sleep. Jim, good luck in the American Party.
Thank you.
Thank you. Until next week, I'm Chris William. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.org.